There's a question that I get asked quite commonly. Not really answered it very specifically or directly like this, and I really should. And the question is what is more important? Lens quality, and we're talking about both micro contrast, build quality, resolution, all things together, which actually make up a great lens, or sensor quality. So the question is what's more important? Lens quality or sensor quality? Most importantly, it should be noted that a camera is not a sensor. There's really no such thing as a bad sensor anymore today. Of course, we actually have Panasonic, we have Tower Jazz, who's making the sensor, and the Nikon D850, and of course we have Sony. There's no such thing as a bad sensor, but people don't realize that vast improvements in signal processing, which is incredibly important, has been implemented, say for the Nikon D3 or D4, for example, which have huge photo sites, which you would think that they would naturally so have sensor side incredibly high SNR, signal to noise ratio, a great amount of gain per unit of time. However, modern cameras like the D850, Nikon D500, both of which have the exact same pixel pitch, you would think would have worse performance at high ISO. The inverse is the case, and that is because a camera is not a sensor. A camera is an image processor clocked off the sensor. SNR firmware, also to structural changes on the wiring of the sensor, backside illuminated sensor, which sounds kind of weird because they're not illuminated from the backside. People say, well, what does a BSI sensor really mean? It means we have actually better gain due to changing the infrastructure of the sensor so that the light gathering capability is improved, which of course improves low light capture as well as high ISO performance. Most people also too, of course, don't realize that ISO is not part of exposure. ISO or ASA was part of exposure in the days of film, but ISO is applied gain to a captured image. The exposure triangle in digital photography is gain and time and SNR. Gain, of course, being aperture, time, of course, being shutter speed, and SNR being signal to noise ratio. So ultimately answering the question and getting to the damn point, which I know someone is saying right now, is which is more important between the two, lens quality, the totality thereof, or sensor quality? And the answer is neither one of those. Foremost, absolutely, is illumination. Everything is lighting, 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 lighting. You can have a really crappy lens, and we're not talking about resolution wise, but a lens that just is a wee bit of a poor performer, especially for micro contrast, like some heavily over-designed 19 element plus lenses. You can actually compensate for a lot of issues with sensor saturation. Sensor saturation is absolutely of great importance. People don't realize that they can buy the best camera that money can buy, the most expensive Zeiss lens that money can buy, and think, well, I'm going to shoot in low light, I'm going to crank up the ISO. This lens is an f1.2 Zeiss or an f1.4 Zeiss lens, and the images still come out looking muddy with poor saturation, and all of the messing with the image in Lightroom and or Photoshop is not really going to change anything for the better. Everything is about lighting. Absolutely everything. Other than architectural photography and landscape photography, 95% of professional photography, at least 95%, is speed light and strobe photography. Sensor saturation is absolutely king. Doesn't matter how good the lens is, doesn't matter how good the sensor is. Without sensor, why people are so absolutely adverse to packing around a speed light everywhere they go. You actually see some professionals outdoor doing macro photography, not just because the lens is so damn close to the subject, but doing photography outdoors in totally bright sunlight. And other than using a reflector, which of course is also useful for actually compressing the dynamic range between your background and your subject, flash photography is insanely important. We think that with our greatly improved cameras that can shoot in 40,000 or 100,000 ISO that we don't need lighting, and that is absolute BS. If for any other reason we could actually shoot in low ISO, have incredible sensor saturation, and we don't have to worry about noise or applying denoise algorithms in Photoshop like a Topaz plugin to, make the ugly look pretty. So, and when it comes to the question between lens quality and harmony and sensor quality, neither one of those is most important. Sensor saturation uh, via light saturation, via strobe, speed light, or even in the case if it's a reflector, in case of a backlit subject, all of these are of absolute importance, far and above that of lens quality and sensor quality. It's like, which would you rather shoot? A $4,000 Zeiss lens with poor lighting, or a crappy $200 junk lens with really great illumination? And I'd rather shoot the shitty lens, unless it has bad bokeh. I mean, all the best lighting in the world isn't going to correct for bad bokeh and some other things, but you can do a lot more with lighting and a crappy lens than you can with a really, really awesome lens. Well, I got the best lens in the world. I'm going to mount it on my most expensive camera in the world. Yeah, you're still going to end up with desaturated, sort of muddy-looking images. There is absolutely no replacement, not by any camera, not by any sensor made, nor by any lens that will compensate for sensor saturation with flash, strobe, saturating that sensor per unit of time and per gain, i.e. aperture. There is nothing that beats illumination. That's the most important thing. I think it's called photography for a reason. Writing with light, photographia. And writing with light, a la the aperture in your lens and the shutter speed in your camera, is insufficient for ideal perfection. Of course, there's no such thing as a perfect picture, but the composition and everything is up to you and what exists between your two damn ears. But sensor saturation is absolutely paramount. Thank you so much for watching. If you like these videos, you can always click the link below. Tell me to jump off a cliff, whatever makes you happy. Thank you. Goodbye.